Good day to you. My name is Brendan. I'm your host. I'm going to call this kind of series, Could It Be? It's inspired by Peter Griffin from The Family Guy with his, what grinds my gears. Except I'm not going to talk about what's grinding my gears. I'm going to talk about what I see and hear and the problems that I see, the source of what I think these problems could be, and hope to help you make decisions on what you should be doing in this particular subject area. So today, there's been a lot of talk about this COVID-19 vaccine. There's a whole bunch of why aren't Americans getting it? We're just not getting vaccinations in the numbers that other developed countries are getting them in. And there's this pandemic of the unvaccinated. There's always going to be somebody that government tries to blame, or the media tries to blame, or, somebody tries to blame. And right now it's going to be the unvaccinated, which I think is funny because there's a lot of stories about vaccinated people having breakthrough infections, even being hospitalized. So it doesn't seem like it's just the unvaccinated. I would not doubt that these vaccinated people who are having breakthrough infections are also spreading the disease because they're contagious and infecting others. It just doesn't make sense that the vaccine would allow them to get sick, but not allow them to pass it on to someone else. So facts aside, I guess, or what you believe, whether the facts are true, there are reports that the vaccinated people are getting sick, getting infected. There's also reports of people who have already had, I take that back. I haven't actually heard a report for that. There was a discussion that people who already had COVID-19 will likely get it again, which is funny because I guess that's just a way of saying, well, vaccinated people are getting it, so everybody else should be getting it too. But there's a very real possibility that the guy or gal who had COVID before may not get it again for a while. It could be that you've got a level of immunity that may be better than the vaccine. Who knows? But just so that you know, the reports, the facts behind the breakthrough cases of people who had vaccines, who got vaccinated and had breakthrough infections, these people had symptoms. They got sick, went to a doctor or a hospital, got tested, found out they have COVID-19. Because if you got COVID symptoms, you might have COVID. And just because you had a vaccine doesn't apparently protect you. So now I want to stay on the topic because I get distracted and go on tangents very easily. You might learn this if I make more videos. But the vaccine doesn't seem to be working out well. It's not the silver bullet that everybody hoped that it would be. People are still calling it an experiment, whether they want to call it an experimental vaccine, or if you want to just call this whole vaccine push an experimental process, because currently if you're under 12 years old, you're not even going to get the vaccine yet. I mean, you're not approved for a vaccine right now. So if we're trying to protect anybody, guess it's not going to be our kids right away. It's going to be everybody else. So people who are in high risk, above 80, 65 and older, whatever, they seem to be getting vaccinated really, really well. Because, according to reports, they're high risk. And if they get the illness, there's a very high likelihood, higher than normal, that they'll survive. However, the fact still remains, apparently, that COVID has a 99.7% survival rate. So if you were 20 years old, invincible, have the whole rest of your life, healthy, and you're likely to get sick and beat it anyway, maybe that guy doesn't want to get vaccinated because he's assessed his risk. And I say guy, I want to put that out right now. I'm not trying to be gender specific. The term includes everybody, guys, gals, trans. There's just too many, and I probably don't even know them all. But please don't take that I'm using the word guy to mean anything specific. I'm just trying to get through this in a way that I don't have to use a lot of pronouns when I'm just referring to people. So maybe I'll just say people. I'll try to work on that. Lots of years behind me where it's guys and girls, so I apologize. But I'll get to LGBTQ stuff in another episode. because I do have plans to go over some stuff that's LGBTQ, and maybe I might even tangent onto it in this episode here as well. We don't know what I might get distracted by. So I think that could it be that Americans aren't getting vaccinated because the entity that seems to be pushing this really, really hard, we don't trust. And I'm not, just for the record, I'm not on board the bus that everybody needs to get vaccinated. If you believe that you're high risk or that you want to have that security that you believe you'll get from a vaccine, by all means, go out and get it. It's an individual choice from how I believe, and if you want to go get it, go get it. I don't think that anybody has the right to tell somebody else that they have to get it. The only time that works is if you work in government. Because being a military veteran myself, I couldn't say I'm not getting that smallpox vaccine. I couldn't say no to a shot. They said, get the shot. Your government property. We're protecting government property. And I got to do what I got to do. So if you work for the police or you work in health, I don't want to say healthcare. Healthcare is not government run unless you work for the VA, I guess. Or you work in, public service. Then yeah, you probably should get the vaccine and not cry about it because you chose that field and it's just part of being government employee. However, that's why I'm in the private sector. That's why I do not work for government, and I would not choose to do that again in the future without, making caveats for I'll do it, but I ain't doing this or I ain't doing that. I learned my lesson the first time when I served almost 14 years in the military. But I digress because I'm off on a tangent again. So, like I said, could it be that Americans just don't trust their government? Well, let's see. You can just go on Google and search government experiments on civilian populations, United States. You'll find stuff. I grew up in foster care near the end of my childhood, and my foster mother was actually part of an experiment that the government conducted where they intentionally released radioactive material into the atmosphere to see how it would affect the population. Of course, they didn't tell the population that they were doing this because, that's how government is. They're here to protect our rights, but apparently they also can do stuff without letting us know or having our consent, and they do this kind of crap, and they've done it all a lot of times. Just off the top of my head, that would be an example. It was in somewhere in the Columbia River in Oregon. I can't remember the name. It started with an H. I'm just bad with names. Then you've got the Tuskegee experiment where government intentionally injected without informing the people that they were injecting black population with syphilis. I think it was black males with syphilis, and then let it go on for years and years and years. I don't mean like a year. I mean like many, many years, over a decade, just to see what would happen and document that stuff. Another experiment. I don't know why you wouldn't trust the government. And there's all sorts of other stuff. You could go with MK Ultra. There's all sorts of things where you just can't trust the government. I could go to like the civil rights movement. That was an era where people were voicing their demand to be treated equally, and it's in the Constitution, all men are created equal, and the government was created by that same Constitution, but our government doesn't have a long history of doing the right thing, whether ethically or morally. And so there's another reason why not to trust government, and I think that these things play into why a lot of Americans may not be willing to get this vaccine. It may also be that it's just not proven well enough, but I mean, even if the FDA approves something, that does not mean that it's safe. The fact is, and I don't know if you may know this or not, but a lot of people may be unaware that a vaccine company who makes a vaccine, even if they intentionally put something in it that's harmful, will not be held liable for the damages that are caused by their vaccine. There have been reports of glass shards being in vaccines, people getting, being injured by such a thing, and not being able to go after the vaccine manufacturer who intentionally did such a thing or intentionally let a product with that in it go out to the public. So, when you have a lack of accountability in our government, the government, I don't even want to say it's our government, the government, isn't really cracking down on making sure that things are essentially safe to the point that somebody will be held accountable if it's not, is kind of messed up. The government's been set up to protect rights and protect people and execute the will of the people, but they have a history of ignoring people. They have a history of intentionally injuring people. They have a history of covering up things that they're supposed to be transparent about. And they supposedly work for us. I mean, if they work for us, they should act like it. And if they don't, well, maybe they should stop being government. And I think that's what the founding fathers were talking about when they were like, I gave you a republic, let's see if you can keep it. But if it doesn't work out, you can always abolish it. How are we going to abolish it if they don't listen to us? See, everything comes at the barrel of a gun. And you may be wondering why I say that. Every rule or law or regulation is ultimately enforced at the barrel of a gun. And those people who enforce these things at the barrel of the gun are your government, or are the government. And you're supposed to trust them, even though they have a history of not being ethical or moral when they need to be. Slavery is a good example. Civil Rights Act is a good example. Women's rights is a good example. And I remember I said I might bring up LGBTQ plus. I can't remember all the letters, but you guys get what I'm saying. It is morally and ethically correct that if people are not hurting someone else and they want to do something that pretty much involves them and other consenting adults, let it go. They ain't hurting nobody. That's their right to do that thing. That's what America is founded on. You can do whatever you want so long as you don't infringe on somebody else's right to do whatever they want. And you're not hurting anybody. So if you want to be queer, trans, bi, homosexual, straight, because straight's starting to become a minority, it almost seems like, hey, knock yourself out. Do whatever it is that you want to do. And I definitely condone that type of activity, that behavior, that you should be able to do whatever you want. And that includes if you want to ingest something and put your mental state in an alternative state. Hey, it's between you and yourself. You ain't hurting me. You ain't hurting anybody else. I don't care. However, if you're responsible for kids, then you're being negligent. You're being reckless. And you are actually harming somebody. So you do have to look at this in a realm of you may be hurting somebody that you have an obligation to protect. And that would be a different case. But anyway, you should be responsible and you should be caring about people around you and their safety and well-being. So to a certain extent, you don't have an obligation to ensure my safety, but you do have an obligation to not create an unsafe environment for me. And so drinking while driving, or being high while driving, or other things, babysitting kids when you can't pay attention to them. These are things that you probably shouldn't do. But anyway, I'm digressing again. I'm trying to get to the government. So basically, do better than your government, or do better than the government. And that's not actually a difficult feat, because I believe most of us are more moral and more ethical than Uncle Sam. And, when we're talking about how they treat military personnel, intentionally putting people near a nuclear blast so that you can study the effects on them when there's going to be gross negative effects, that is bad. Even going to war and using napalm, for example, which is going to have a detrimental impact on the civilian population after you leave that field, using depleted uranium, for example, is another example where we go waste away an entire environment in war, and then it's not usable when we're done because we have contaminated it with hazardous material. Is a horrible, horrible thing for the U.S. government to be doing. So, do we trust government? Could it be that that's the reason why people are not getting vaccinated in the numbers that the government wants and desires? President Biden talks a good game in his administration, wanting to get everybody vaccinated. However, he's failing really, really bad because they're failing to address the reason behind it. So until the federal government comes out and decides to start acting ethically and morally in all cases, then trust is likely going to be a major issue. I know that for me, that is part of the reason why, but also I look at myself as being relatively healthy and do not believe that if I got COVID-19 that I'm likely to be part of that 0.3%. That is 0.3% mortality rate that's associated with coronavirus. So since I believe I'm still likely to survive, it's not a big deal to me. That's my belief, and I might be wrong, but it's my belief, and I'm free to have it. I'm free to exercise it, and nobody has a right to do anything other than that. I don't have to believe in a higher power or not believe in a higher power to have that belief and need it to be respected. It's my body, my choice. And again, with women on that regard, it's their body, their choice as well. I don't think that men should be making decisions for them about their bodies. That's me. But again, we can trust the government because they work for you and they sure act like it all the time, right? I don't think so. But I'm curious as what you might have to say about it. If you think that this that this could be true, that the numbers of a major number of the people that are not getting vaccinated, if you think that a core reason could be that they don't trust the government, leave a comment below. Open discussion. That's one of the reasons why I'm even doing this video. I like to engage in conversation and get people thinking about things that they might not know. I also like introducing facts. Pardon me, I didn't want to make this super long and have citations for everything or have a script even while I did this. This is just thoughts off the top of my head in one take, no editing, right? So that's what I hope that these sessions will be like. Could it be? And I hope to talk about income tax, and I hope to talk about Black Lives Matter and Back in the Blue, the Trump supporters, all of this stuff, anything that's up and about, I would love to talk about and get people's feedback on it and see what they think. But I can give you my point of view, and what I see is I believe that it's more likely than not even, that the majority of people who are not getting the vaccine at some level or another are likely not getting it because they don't trust the government. And there's probably a really justified reason why not to trust government. They don't have a great track record. Distant past, not so distant past, and present. Government is just, they're not as transparent as they've always told us, whether you want to talk about the Reagan administration or Obama administration or Trump administration, there was not a whole lot of transparency. So if you're not being transparent, but they're talking about it, can you trust them? Is it better to believe in yourself than to believe in what government says? Absolutely. At least your reality. You have no idea what the government's presenting to you is, if it's really reality. It's just a PR campaign to get you to not revolt against them or something like, you never know. So anyway, could it be? That's a session. I look forward to feedback. If there's something you would have liked to have heard me talk about or include, feel free. Maybe there'll be a part 2. Anyway, thanks for your time, and could it be?